In Seattle, Washington State's Attorney General announced he is suing President Trump. The announcement was made at an extraordinary media conference in which the Attorney General was joined by State Governor Jay Inslee, who criticised the inhumanity of the President's executive order and said, and I quote, "You do not back down to bullies." Martha Bellal was at the news conference for Associated Press, and her description of it has been used by newspapers and news websites throughout the world.
Washington is the first state to actually take this kind of action. There have been other lawsuits filed on behalf of some of the individuals, but the state of Washington is standing up and saying this action was unconstitutional. The order is unconstitutional on a number of grounds.
And so you have the Attorney General Bob Ferguson, who was making the kind of legal case on behalf of Washington State, and then you have a very strong performance by the Governor, Jay Inslee. What was he saying?
Oh, he was pretty. He did have some strong words. He basically said that people have the right to not be discriminated against based on their religion. He felt strongly that this is a cruel act, that it discriminates based on faith, and it was un-American, and he even encouraged people to continue their resistance to some of the actions that the president has been taking. He said this is not a reality TV show. This is real, and he called it even a train wreck. And he said that he lives on Bainbridge Island, which is one of the places where they rounded up some of the Japanese and put them in internment camps. He said our nation can't sacrifice its liberty based on fear.
I'm reading once again from your copy. This is un-American, it is wrong, and it will not stand. That's the governor. Of course, the legal case is what's important, because the political case, whilst it's absolutely fascinating, Trump is president, and so the politics are kind of over for the foreseeable future. But what case does Attorney General Bob Ferguson take? In other words, how does it work? What happens next?
Well, he hasn't filed it yet. He's filing it this afternoon. Today is Monday in the U.S., and he will file a complaint which lays out the different points that he believes are in the executive order that are unconstitutional. He's also filing what's called a temporary restraining order, which, if the judge grants it, it means that everything will stop. It just puts everything on hold while all these questions are being answered by the courts.
And what court do you file that in? That's in the federal court, is it?
It's in the federal court system. So as soon as it goes in, the judges will make a decision whether this is an emergency, and if they can issue the restraining order, then it'll put everything on hold so that they can then look at the constitutional questions. There are questions of whether you can target a religion, whether that's constitutional, whether there was due process. I mean, the Constitution allows a person to go through a legal process, and Ferguson says that this executive order is unconstitutional because it doesn't allow that to happen.
And if the federal court upholds that, what is the White House able to do in response? Are they able to redraft the order to make it consistent with what the federal court's telling them they have to do, or do they have to appeal?
Well, that's a question. I guess both of those are a possibility. If the judge comes back and says that certain points of the order are unconstitutional, the White House could come back and make some changes, or just appeal that process and take it all the way to the Supreme Court. So it's hard to know yet.
Gosh, this is fascinating, isn't it? What's the support for this kind of action in Washington State? Washington State voted Democrat, right? And so there is public opinion behind these moves, both by your Attorney General and your Governor?
Definitely behind the Governor and the Attorney General. And Seattle has been, there have been protests every day. There have been demonstrations at the airport. There are people who were detained there. And so there's a lot of support for pushing back against this order and other of the president's orders.
Yes, Washington State taking Donald Trump on.